Us, for most people, were taught that World War II began with a sudden burst of fanatical ideology and the rise of a ruthless dictator. We were told that an entire nation was swept into madness, building a war machine that nearly conquered Europe, entirely out of blind political ambition. But that popular narrative skips over a very cold, comfortable financial reality. As before a dictator can march armies across borders, after those armies must be armed, supplied, and fed. A modern nation cannot construct thousands of tanks, build advanced air fleets, manufacture millions of tons of synthetic fuel, using national pride alone. Hires raw materials, advanced industrial patents, massive infrastructure investments, and above all else, hard foreign capital. And in the 1920s, after the catastrophic devastation of World War I, Germany had none of those things. Currency had been reduced to literal ashes, its foreign reserves were completely drained, and its industrial output was locked under crushed international sanctions. So a fundamental question remains, one that is rarely addressed in standard history textbooks. How did a nation that was totally bankrupt in 1923 transform into the most technologically advanced military power on Earth just 15 years later? Provided the international credit lines, chemical, patents, from the industrial equipment, currency, and the foreign currency, to rebuild that broken country. If you follow the popular history, the story begins in political rally halls and ideological manifestos. But if you follow the ledger books, the story begins inside quiet banking offices in Manhattan, after them in secret loan agreements signed in Wall Street, and in international financial clearinghouses in Switzerland. This is the missing chapter of the Second World War. This is the hidden financial circle that connected American private investment to the rearmament of the Third Reich. For 4 painful years, 1314 to 1918, the European continent turned itself into a slaughterhouse. When the guns finally fell silent, the victorious Allied nations, primarily Britain and France, lost their own terrifying financial reality. They had won the war on the battlefield, but they had nearly destroyed their own national treasuries in the process. Financed the immense cost of artillery, ships, and millions of soldiers, Britain and France had borrowed heavily from private American investment banks, led by Wall Street titans like J. P. Morgan. By 1919, Allied governments owed billions of gold-backed dollars, to American creditors. And the United States Treasury, backed by Wall Street bankers, I had one thing abundantly clear to London and Paris, from those wartime debts ought to be repaid in full. With massive debt obligations to America, the British and French political leaders looked for someone else, to foot the bill. They turned their eyes toward their defeated enemy, Germany. In the summer of 1919, inside the Mirror Hall at the Palace of Versailles, the victors imposed the controversial Treaty of Versailles. Article 231, famously known as the War Guilt Clause, forced Germany to accept sole moral responsibility for the war. And with that moral responsibility, came an unfathomable financial penalty. The Allied Reparations Commission set Germany's total debt at 132 billion gold marks. It was a figure so absurdly massive, top economists of the era, including John Maynard Keynes, warned it was mathematically impossible for Germany to pay. Keynes argued that crushing Germany with infinite debt paralyzed European trade, must ruin the international currency system, and inevitably trigger a catastrophic new war. His warnings were completely ignored by political leaders who were desperate to collect cash to pay off their own American bankers. For the next 4 years, the German government tried to meet its impossible debt payments by doing the only thing a bankrupt state can do, printing paper currency. The result was hyperinflation on a scale the modern world had never seen before. By 1923, German paper mark was entirely worthless. Priceless family heirlooms were traded for a single loaf of bread. Butchers collected their daily wages in wheelbarrows filled with paper bills, as from only to find those bills could not buy a cup of coffee by the evening. Citizens used stacks of currency notes like their kitchen stoves, as paper money was cheaper than actual firewood. Germany had suffered a complete economic cardiac arrest. From, and when Germany defaulted on its mandatory deliveries of coal and timber in early 1923, the French government reacted with cold military force. Russian Belgian troops marched across the border, occupying the Ruhr Valley, the industrial heartland of Germany. French soldiers took over German steel mills, coal mines, and railway lines, attempting to seize physical assets as payment for unpaid debts. The German workers responded with passive resistance, refusing to work under foreign military bayonets. Our European economy ground to a complete standstill. And that created a massive crisis, not just for Berlin, Paris, or London, but for Wall Street. As if Germany's economy collapsed completely, it would not pay reparations to Britain and France. And if Britain and France did not receive those reparations, they would default on their massive war loans owed to American banks. Our global credit network was hanging by a paper thread. Wall Street was facing a multi-billion-dollar systemic default. A radical financial solution had to be crafted, and it had to be done fast. In 1924, a committee of international financial experts gathered to resolve the European debt crisis. The committee was chaired by an American banker and politician named Charles G. Dawes. Dawes, alongside senior executives from major Wall Street banking firms, recognized that the Versailles punitive approach had completely failed. You could not extract blood from a stone, and you could not extract gold reparations from a ruined economy. So they devised a brilliant, yet deeply paradoxical financial architecture, known as the Dawes Plan. The fire mechanism of the Dawes Plan was astonishingly simple, yet profoundly consequential. Instead of demanding that Germany pay immediate reparations from its depleted reserves, American private banks would step in and lend Germany hundreds of millions of American dollars. However, under this new arrangement, Wall Street banks, led by J.P. Morgan and Dillon Read, floated massive international bond issues for the German government and German corporations. American citizens of investment funds and industrial firms bought these high-yielding German bonds, sending a massive wave of fresh U.S. dollars straight across the Atlantic into Berlin. Once Germany received these private American loans, it used those exact same U.S. dollars to pay its mandatory war reparations to France and Britain. And then France and Britain took those exact same dollars and shipped them right back across the Atlantic to pay their World War I debts to the U.S. Treasury and Wall Street banks. It was a staggering financial carousel. American private capital was pumped into Germany, traveled through Berlin to Paris and London, and then circled right back to New York. At every single stop on this financial carousel, international banks collected lucrative underwriting fees, settlements, interest payments, passive and transaction commissions. The system looked like a stroke of genius. It stabilized the German currency, allowed Britain and France to keep paying their debt obligations, generated massive profits for Manhattan investment houses. In 1929, when the Dawes Plan needed further adjustments, another American financier, Owen de Young stepped in with the Young Plan, reducing Germany's annual obligations and floating even more international loans. Between 1924 and 1931, through the Dawes and Young Plans, Germany received more than 25 billion Reichsmarks in foreign loans, the vast majority of it originating directly from Wall Street. To put that figure into perspective, during that exact same period, all Germany paid roughly 20 billion Reichsmarks in total war reparations. Mathematically, Germany paid for its entire World War I reparations using borrowed American money. In fact, Germany actually kept a net surplus of billions of American dollars. And where did that vast, remaining surplus of foreign capital go? It did not sit idle in bank vaults. It flowed directly into the modernization and expansion of Germany's heavy industrial complexes. That is, while politicians gave speeches about international peace in Geneva, American capital was quietly rebuilding the industrial apparatus of Europe's most formidable power. Through the late 1920s, American banks and industrial monopolies poured capital, technical patents, and managerial expertise straight into German conglomerates. As your American corporations saw Weimar Germany not as a former military enemy, but as the most profitable, high-tech industrial frontier in Europe. Wall Street investment firm Dillon, Todd & Company underwrote massive loans for Vereinigte Stahlwerke, the United Steel Works of Germany. The colossal corporate cartel quickly became the largest steel producer in Europe, eventually manufacturing the bulk of the armor plate, hostile girders, and artillery shells used by the German military in World War II. At the same time, American manufacturing giants established deep structural ties with German industry. General Electric purchased a major stock interest in AEG, primary German electrical manufacturing giant, while placing American representatives directly on its board of directors. International Telephone and Telegraph, known as ITT, acquired massive stakes in German communication firms, eventually owning Focke-Wulf aircraft production facilities through subsidiaries. Henry Ford built a massive automotive assembly plant in Cologne, Ford Work, which would later manufacture tens of thousands of military trucks and tracked vehicles for the German army. General Motors purchased Atom Opel AG, as Germany's largest passenger car producer, transforming its factories into state-of-the-art manufacturing hubs capable of churning out military transport vehicles. Perhaps the most vital, classroom, and alarming strategic partnership occurred in the chemical industry between the American oil giant Standard Oil of New Jersey and the German chemical cartel IG Farben. IG Farben was the largest chemical enterprise on Earth, a mega cartel that controlled the patents for dyes, colostrum, pharmaceuticals, explosives, and synthetic materials. However, Germany possessed one critical strategic vulnerability that had lost them World War I, that had no natural petroleum reserves. If a war broke out, Germany's military would be instantly paralyzed. At that moment, foreign oil shipments were blockaded. To solve this fatal weakness, IG Farben scientists developed a revolutionary technology, hydrogenation, chemical process of converting abundant German coal, high-octane liquid synthetic fuel. Developing this technology on an industrial scale required immense financial resources and specialized chemical expertise. In 1929, Standard Oil of New Jersey entered into a historic cartel agreement with IG Farben. Standard Oil provided IG Farben with crucial financial backing, technical patents, and specialized chemical knowledge, including the vital patent for tetraethyllead, an indispensable chemical additive required to produce high-octane aviation gasoline. In exchange, IG Farben agreed not to compete with Standard Oil in the global petroleum market outside Germany. Without tetraethyl lead, as modern military aircraft could not achieve the performance needed for combat flight. American technical expertise had effectively solved Germany's greatest geopolitical vulnerability. By the early 1930s, long before Adolf Hitler ever assumed absolute power, the foundation of Germany's industrial military potential had been completely modernized. Built with American machinery, funded by Wall Street bonds, and fueled by American technology. When the Great Depression struck Wall Street in October 1929, the fragile financial carousel came crashing down. American banks, suddenly facing complete insolvency at home, abruptly cut off all foreign credit lines and demanded immediate repayment of short-term loans. A sudden withdrawal of American capital hit Germany like a nuclear shockwave. German banks collapsed, industrial output plummeted by 50%, and over 6 million workers were thrown into the streets without food or employment. The utter devastation of the German middle class created the exact conditions of panic, desperation, and rage that radical political movements needed to thrive. In 1933, promising to smash the Versailles Treaty, destroy the banking system, and restore German national pride, Adolf Hitler was appointed chancellor. The Nazi regime appointed a brilliant, Old calculating economist named Hjalmar Schacht as president of the Reichsbank and later as Minister of Economics. Schacht understood the international financial system better than almost anyone alive. He knew that Germany was vastly outmatched in gold reserves, foreign exchange currency. He devised a series of radical financial mechanisms designed to fund massive, secret rearmament without triggering a currency collapse or immediate foreign intervention. One of Schacht's most notorious inventions was the Mefo bill. Mefo bills were promissory notes issued by a dummy corporation called Metallurgische Forschungsgesellschaft, backed secretly by the German state. The German government paid arms manufacturers, Siemens, and Rheinmetall, not with actual offerings from, but with Mefo bills. These bills could be traded between corporations or converted into cash at the Reichsbank after several years, earning a guaranteed 4% interest rate. Through Mefo bills, the Third Reich was able to finance billions of marks in secret military spending, entirely off the official national budget balance sheets. Foreign intelligence agencies and international investors looked at the official German government budget and saw no massive military expenditures, while in reality, factories were churning out thousands of artillery pieces, tanks, and combat aircraft around the clock. At the same time, cleverly manipulated Germany's remaining foreign debts. He suspended interest payments on foreign loans, forcing American and European creditors to accept deeply discounted German scrip, side agreements that required foreign businesses to buy German-manufactured goods. American banks, desperate to recover at least a fraction of their original 25 billion mark loans, continued to negotiate with Schacht. Cutting off Germany entirely, from many foreign institutions chose to maintain their business relationships, hoping that a strong, reindustrialized Germany would eventually pay off its historical debts and serve as a fierce, anti-communist bulwark against the Soviet Union. While national governments traded bitter diplomatic warnings in public, a highly secretive financial institution was operating quietly in Basel, Switzerland. In 1930, part of the Young Plan negotiations, the world's major central banks created the Bank for International Settlements, known as the BIS. The BIS was established to serve as a central clearinghouse for international reparations payments and to foster cooperation among central banks. It was granted complete diplomatic immunity, total freedom from national taxes, absolute freedom from government oversight. Its board of directors included the heads of the Bank of England, Reichsbank, the Bank of France, and senior private bankers from New York and Tokyo. When World War II erupted in September 1939, that extraordinary situation unfolded inside the walls of the BIS in Basel. While British, French, and German soldiers were slaughtering each other on the battlefield, the central bankers of those warring nations remained members of the very same financial institution. Throughout the entire war, president of the Bank for International Settlements was an American banker named Thomas H. McKittrick. Under McKittrick's leadership, IAS continued to process international financial transactions, keep detailed accounting ledgers, and hold regular board meetings. Allied and Axis representatives sat at the exact same table. Even more shocking was the handling of looted central bank gold. As the German army invaded and occupied Czechoslovakia, Austria, Belgium, and the Netherlands, the Nazi regime seized hundreds of tons of monetary gold reserves from the national bank vaults of those conquered nations. Out of this looted gold was melted down by the Reichsbank, stamped with pre-war dates, transferred directly to the Bank for International Settlements. Because the Nazi war machine urgently needed Swiss francs and other neutral currencies to purchase vital strategic raw materials, such as tungsten from Portugal, iron ore from Sweden, and oil from Romania. Despite knowing that this gold had been stolen from occupied nations, and despite explicit warnings from Allied governments, IAS accepted the gold transfers from the Reichsbank, providing the Third Reich with the liquid foreign exchange necessary to keep its war machine fighting. Highest levels of global finance, if the ledger books remained open, And business continued as usual, long after the world had dissolved into total war. By September 1939, theoretical calculations of Wall Street investment bankers, complex loan agreements of the 1920s, had transformed into an inescapable physical reality. When the German Blitzkrieg